This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Happy Tuesday, everybody, as you welcome you into Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network, alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you. We're live in downtown Las Vegas, Circa Resort and Casino. And I didn't realize how much traction we were going to get yesterday on our NHL versus NBA debate, but things were getting fiery.
It's not exactly ours, it's yours. I brought up something completely and utterly different, but much like the insecure hockey fan you and many are, we have to make it into something it's not. We get it. Nobody watches the sport. You want more people to do it. I understand that. More people will, but it didn't need to turn into this.
It's not an insecurity. It is a desire, though, to have more people be invested in a sport that is so interesting and so fun and high-flying and physical and demanding. Mm-hmm. No?
It sounds definitely like you guys are not insecure about it.
Look, even last night, I have to say, there was this magical moment, and I know you tried to come for me a little bit later on in the second portion of the NBA and NHL doubleheader, but it was so magical just seeing the difference of a really competitive, fun, exciting game and then a complete torch blowout, which, although I know the second half of the night went a little bit differently and the Warriors game was very fun, but I don't smile and smirk at me like this, because what I'm going to say is I feel like the first set of games was a better example of what the entirety of the postseason has been like for each of these, considering how many blowouts we have had in the NBA.
How many have we had?
From a series standpoint, I mean, you have two sweeps and every other series is up 3-1.
Hey,
so that's what I'm saying. Like,
wait, hold on.
The NBA is so top heavy, it's not interesting.
Hold on. All right. So now we're moving the thing. We can't do this. Bill's going to get mad. We can't do this. But you can't move the goalposts, because even when you talk about a blowout, when it's a series perspective, the Grizzlies were hyper competitive in the last three games of that series. It needed Shea on a walk-off, essentially step back jumper to beat him in game 4. It was a historic comeback in game 3. Like, we can go down the list. The only series that has not been consistent from game to game and blowout from game to game has been the 1-8 matchup, which we saw yesterday. But everything on a game-to-game basis has been great and tight, and point spreads have been there.
They got close at the end, but I wouldn't say that those Grizzlies games were all close throughout, would you?
Yeah. Not the first two. But yes,
so you say there's 4 games.
Right.
Half of them were not.
What about the other games that were played in these 6 other series?
Saying, when you look at the NHL postseason to this point, there was not a single sweep. All 4 games in the Western Conference were tied 2-2 at one point. It's just it's a different thing. I'm just saying the NBA is a little bit too top heavy for me right now. And aside from Clippers, Nuggets, they've been lopsided. And I don't think you can argue that. That said, let's get to the point of the day and all of the good breakdowns that we have coming up over the course of the next 2 hours. It is time, as we always do, to kick things off with the rundown.
It's time for the top headlines and topics of the day. This is the rundown.
So, in addition to all the NBA and NHL action, we've got a full MLB slate coming up today. All 30 teams on the field today. We'll talk overnight line movement, games we like and teams we don't. Speaking of which, it appears the Rockies have reached a new rock bottom. JVT went up 3-0 in the first against the Braves yesterday, but that was all she wrote as they lose 6-3 and fall to now 4-24 on the season.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what Adam Burke thinks about this, but from a win total standpoint for the Rockies, what you expect from them, I think, is going to be pretty interesting. There are many who are throwing out like sub 50 wins. That seems aggressive, but this team sucks, and so I'm very curious how bad this really does get for this group, because this is, I think there was a couple of nice pieces that were a part of this Rockies roster, but they haven't even worked out. I'm looking at Brenton Doyle among some others, so I'm very curious to see how low the bottom is, because bad teams are never as bad as we expect them to be, but this seems to be a special type of bad for Colorado.
Just one win for them in the last 2 weeks, and the opponent team total has gone over now in 7 straight games. We'll see if that'll push forward again today. But again, as you mentioned, VSiN's own Adam Burke is going to join us later on in hour 2. He'll be on the desk with us for a full half hour. Then we also will hit on all the NBA and NHL postseason coming up today. 5 potential elimination games coming up. That said, kind of like I was referencing earlier, I'm more interested in all these 2-2 series. Golden Knights Wild, Kings Oilers, Nuggets Clippers. 8 playoff games tonight overall. Should be a good one.
Yeah, one for the Knights at the very least. Obviously selfish because it's out here. You used to cover the team, but I would also say that I bet them to win the series going into Game 4. I also think, I'm not a nuanced viewer of hockey, but I have watched a team that I think has, for lack of a better term, played with their food, right? Made a lot of mistakes, and I think shot themselves in the foot many times. So I think that this is a squad that can go and win the rest of these games and still win this in 6. But I'm very curious to see what the effort is at home, where they've played much better throughout the regular season.
I hope they do. I'm going to the game tonight, too, so I would rather not be there for an L, especially when I, too, have a series bet on them. And with the NBA postseason rolling on, Unabated's Justin Phan will join the show like he does each and every week. We'll get kind of the prop breakdown from his perspective. And for one team in the NBA last night, it was a great night. Great night for the Warriors. Great night for Jimmy Butler. Bad night for Pat Riley and his former team in the Heat, who get torched by 55 in an eventual sweep for the top seed Cavs.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Butler was great yesterday, especially down the stretch, hitting 3 free throws after a big foul. Now coming back and talking about the big rebound when you're dealing with the injury to the hip after you had fallen really hard on it. So this is absolutely great, man. I think that this recovery from the injury has been absolutely tremendous. And look, they put themselves in the driver's seat to potentially win this series. So I'm very excited to see how this plays out.
Had a slow start in the game, but second half, 23 points. In the fourth quarter, had 14. The rest of the Warriors had 13. He was perfect at the foul line. I feel like everything they needed from him in that fourth quarter, they got.
Yeah, I think this is what I'm curious about, like this game too. We talked about the game going over. You finally got good offensive nights from both teams. For Jimmy Butler himself, you wonder if, as we move forward to the series, because he had the big ice pack on his back yesterday, and he very much talked about how hurt he was. So you do wonder if he can continue to keep this up, because they look like a different offensive team with him out there. Remember, in game 1, they were up by 20 at one point, and then, of course, the Rockets kind of clamped down a bit. They end up winning that game. We saw what happened in game 2 when he left that game. And then in game 3, they needed, historic Steph over 30 points to end up getting that thing. So his health is going to be very paramount for this team, not only in the series and moving forward. And from an offensive standpoint, too, I mean, you finally get a series that gets out of the mud, but it was still so slow last night. Only 87 possessions yesterday. Yeah. It was an absolute slog and a grind. So I think that he is obviously very important, but for a paper-thin Warriors team, it's magnified what he's been able to do.
But you got your over, at least, too. So even with it being another slugfest and a defensive game that was slow, you get the over there. Over comes through in both games. The Warriors win, obviously, but don't cover the closing number for 3.5 ends 3.
Yep. I was just laughing because how about that? The absolute blowout that was the Cavs and Heat still got over the total.
Yeah.
That was one where I was like, oh boy, like this is going to be one. Because one of the things I do like to do is when you have some of those blowouts like that, you actually kind of in-game, you tend to look a little under because like the algorithm, the in-game totals, they'll start to balloon because you'll see the scoring pace there, but it is being carried by one team. And then ultimately you start to find an in-game under and they come in there. And then when you get the scrubs in the fourth quarter, then you really start to see the total dwindle. But that was one that got you there, at least from the pre-flop standpoint.
So how many people do you think last night got lost in the sauce that weren't really necessarily watching the game, but saw a plus 32.5 or something like that? Looking at, because you think about the pre-flop number being 8.5, you're like, oh man, plus 32.5, they're going to come. Well, then everybody pulls their starters. You get out to as many as 60. I saw as high on the live line as 54.5. Even that doesn't cover with the game falling on 55. Just a brutal finish there in what was a historic win in a historic series for the Cavs. Miami is the first team to lose back-to-back playoff games by at least 30, and this was the most lopsided series win in NBA playoff history.
I told this to Jensen and Dave earlier today when I was on with them. I was really impressed with Cleveland in this series. When you look back at this iteration of the Cavaliers, namely, the Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland quartet, if you will, there have been some moments in the postseason throughout this short time together where you've kind of questioned about whether or not they have the gumption, if you will, to really take on and squash an opponent that you are much better than. And outside of Game 2, which they did not cover but still won, they took it to this Heat team every single game. And I thought that was really impressive, watching them be able to do that. And it gives you a little bit more confidence as you move forward. I mean, look, they're probably going to get most likely, they're probably going to get the Indiana Pacers in the next round. And that is a matchup in which I think you could have made the argument, all right, how does Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland hold up defensively when they're fully healthy against a backcourt like that? Do you trust that this team's going to be able to handle business against a Pacers squad which has been playing very good basketball for the second half of the season? my confidence in their ability to do that, to me at least, it has ballooned after watching them easily dispatch the Miami Heat, despite Tyler Hero's proclamation over the weekend that they would not get swept.
So much for that. But at halftime, there was a tweet at NBA on TNT. Y'all can just cut to a cold case episode because it's over. Somebody at the end of the game, the Heat don't deserve Galveston, much less Cancun, with the way things played out. It was an ugly ending for the Heat. And with that, though, because you mentioned your appreciation for what the Cavs were able to do. They are still the second shot to win the Eastern Conference, plus 175, but that number's obviously coming down in both the Eastern and Western Conference favorite. We have Western Conference odds. We have those odds-on favorites, the Celtics minus 140, the OKC Thunder minus 175. Last couple of seconds here, I want to go to the NHL because depending on which side you had, it was either a tough beat or an awesome win in Lightning Panthers for you last night. 2-1 Lightning with 3:47 left in the third period. So you're trending toward a Lightning money line and under. Tampa Bay was so clean in their own end almost the entire night. Blown coverage leads to an Aaron Ekblad game-tying goal. So now you think, okay, we're headed to overtime. You can still get the under. Nope. Seth Jones scores 11 seconds later. Verhaeghe gets an empty netter. So you go from thinking it is Tampa, money line, and under to actually, no, the Florida Panthers cover the puck line and the game goes over.
Yeah, so there was a lot of much smarter hockey people than I think were pointing to Tampa Bay being pretty competitive in this series. And yet here they are down 3-1, which is, I think, pretty surprising given what I had heard. And like you said, I mean, look, this was on razor's edge pretty much the whole way until you got a little bit late. But I am surprised about the way this thing has gone. The even strength metrics don't paint that big of a picture. But when you're talking about games like this, if it swings one way, it's going to happen. I'm surprised by the Lightning being in such a big hole, especially considering, I mean, I didn't think 3-1 series leads existed in the NHL.
Well, 3:47
I don't know. These series, these East series have been kind of lopsided. These have been blowouts in the East.
Feel like they're on life alert, though. They have fallen and they can't get up. We got to take
blowouts in the East.
A quick timeout. When we come back, we'll look at the line movement in the games tonight in the NHL, NBA, and Major League Baseball. And do you approve this move? We'll be right back.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Odds move up, odds move down. Let's see where the odds are moving today in Do You Approve This Move?
Considering we host a show called Money Moves, it seems appropriate to discuss the money that is on the move and line movement overnight. We're going to do that in the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball here as we welcome you back to the show. JVT, Stormy, Buonantony with you. And let's start in the association with the team you love, the Clippers and Nuggets. We've seen a flip of favorites here. Clippers lost at home to Denver on Saturday in heartbreaking fashion. The first playoff buzzer-beating dunk of the play-by-play era. It's the second dagger loss for them of the series, also dropping game 1 by 2 points in overtime. They're on the road for game 5, but getting bet. Do you approve this move out from getting 1 to now -2 in some spots?
In a vacuum, yes. Like, do I approve the market going in the Clippers' direction? Yes. Now that we're up to 2 at some spots, I feel like that might be the bridge where you probably don't want to cross at this point. Let's put it this way. The Clippers right now have a plus 7.5 net rating in non-garbage time. Of the teams that have a better net rating in the postseason, all of them are either up 3-1 or have swept their opponents. Cleveland and Oklahoma City, they're 2-2. So in other words, they have been the better team. They have been playing Denver on a level that is on par with Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Boston, Minnesota, Indiana, these teams that I'm referencing that are up in their series or either done with their series. So they're clearly the better team. I think they deserve to be favored. The moments in which they have played at their peak, they have been clearly better. But as I keep saying, the Nuggets have been more consistent, and that has been something that has carried them to this point. So do I say go run out in late 2? Say you probably missed the boat, but I do approve of the actual market move in this direction.
Yeah, and we'll dive into our best bets later, but I know you and I are both on the Clippers money line, taking that approach versus laying the number. Yeah. Let's go to Magic Celtics. Early money on Orlando here with the big spread in a win-or-go-home game for the Magic, down from 12 to 11 with Boston favored. Do you approve this move?
Yeah, I think some of this has to do with injury, too. Jaylen Brown's officially questionable. Drew Holiday is still out with that hamstring strain. We should also note that Orlando has just been extremely competitive in this series. I believe covering every single contest, if I remember correctly. So this just, I think, deems, hey, look, Orlando deserves a little bit more respect from what they have been playing here. And I think that this would probably be a number which kind of floats around this. So generally approve it, especially, too, if Jaylen Brown's not going to be available today. Would expect that he is, but I think a little bit has to do with injury more than market support. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition.
Okay, and And last but certainly not least of these items, Bucks Pacers. Big move on the total here, from 225 at open to as low as 221.5. We do have some buyback now to 222.5, but still a 3-point move to the under. No Damian Lillard for the Bucks, who the MRI results confirmed yesterday is a torn Achilles, as we all believed and thought. I heard a lot of people thinking that this game could play out the way more similar to the way that game 1 played out, which would be an under, which would be a big win for the Pacers. Do you agree with that concept, and do you approve the move?
Yeah, I think that this is probably, actually, I don't want to say like a bloodletting, right? But like Indiana, you got to smell blood in the water. Like this thing might be over. I think one thing that's going to be interesting to note here is Giannis, as we have kind of discussed, has done everything possible, despite the fact that they are down. His points, rebounds, and assists is an interesting number to look at today. It's like 51.5, 52.5. I still think you're going to get like the good bring your lunch pail to work effort from Giannis. So maybe he helps us get over the total. With Dame not out there, I don't think it's actually that big of an impact. He hasn't really been super impactful in the minutes. So I can understand maybe the market initially moving the under, considering we know that Dame is not going to be out there. But like you mentioned, the buyback does make sense as we're getting up. And before we move on from the NBA, I would like to note one more move. Detroit, New York was as low as 212.5. Offshore, we're up to 214.5 now. So total is starting to move up there as well. Okay,
good note. Yeah, let's get to the National Hockey League, where it's been very competitive.
Well, I feel like I should ask you these ones.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Oilers at Kings. Let's do this. The Kings open up as a $1.25 favorite. It's moved 10 cents in their direction. It's now minus 135. Stormy, do you approve this move?
I do. The Kings have been the better team for the first 2 periods in every game of this series, pretty much. And they're going back home where they won the first 2 games of the set. I absolutely approve the move in their favor. That said, I am extremely worried for them about the way that these third periods have gone, which actually could lead to a bet, by the way. If it's not something that most books will give you the opportunity to do pre-flop, but a third period over is something I might want to target in-game, or I was even looking at there's a market for highest scoring period, third period, at around 2-1 being the price there. But the Oilers have been significantly better in these end of game, third period, and later situations.
So I'm always wondering why. So why? Like, are those third periods happening because it's just a blip on the radar and these things happen in the third period? Does something change in the third periods that would then lead to these explosions happening in the final period of play?
So I know when we dive into the full NHL slate, I'll give the exact numbers on these, but I think a lot of it is the Kings defensemen being a little bit gassed and having guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl who have all the energy and speed in the world coming at you. They have primarily, the Kings that is, played 4 and 5D lately. And we'll get into the numbers, but they've got some older defensemen as well. And when you're playing 32 to 36 minutes in a game, that's a lot of time, and that's a difficult thing when you have those high-end talented players coming at you, especially if you're on a power play. So that's my thought on it, at least, is that they're a little bit tired.
Let's go to Wild
like the
at
Lakers.
Knights. Vegas Golden Knights open up as a 220 favorite here. They are now up to minus 245 despite playing like ass throughout this series. Some line changes as well, I think you noted. So do you approve this is 25-cent move in favor of the Knights?
Yeah, that's something that typically scares me a little bit, is when a team that has been as good as the Golden Knights have been throughout the course of the regular season do the line switch up maneuver. It feels like a little bit of a panic move to me. It did give them a bump in the last game, but it obviously wasn't enough. So we're going to see Carlson, Eichel, and Dorofeev on the top lines, Saad, Hurdle, and Stone on the second line. And I just think this has gotten too far out. I understand why people are betting them with the series shifting back at home in the belief that they're the better team, but I do think that the Wild have just gotten healthy at the right time. They're playing with a lot of confidence. They are doing things in this series no one thought they would do, and at minus 245, that is way too rich for my blood.
All right, and the last one in the hockey, the greatest sport ever. Toronto, minus 165 at the open. Now we're upwards of minus 180. Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. This series is over. The series is over tonight. The Leafs are back at home. Chance to close out the Senators in the series tonight, whereas in years past, closeout games have been the Toronto Maple Leafs kryptonite. And I will give you the note here. It's not pretty. Their last 13 potential series clinching games, the Leafs are 1-12, averaging 1.92 goals per game and allowing 3.54 goals against per game. That said, this team feels different. They are comfortable. I feel like in a closeout game back at home in Toronto, they handle business today. I absolutely understand why they're being bet, and I think they're a good parlay piece tonight.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I'm confused. I didn't think that they could be 3-1 series in hockey.
Again with this. I'm talking overall. You're the one that came out and said this is the best NBA postseason in a decade.
It had nothing to do with your precious hockey.
move on to Major League Baseball, which we will do here. Starting with the Yankees and Orioles. New York from minus 148 out to minus 155. O's beat the Yankees yesterday 4-3. So in a bounce-back spot with Carlos Rodon on the hill. I don't know about you. I do approve this move. Looking at Rodon's numbers after his slow start, is now on back-to-back starts, giving up 6 hits and just 1 run, none earned, along with 17 Ks. Are you buying this move on the market?
Yeah, I think we look across the board. Rodon's numbers, as I like to use the term, are pretty tight. Like, there's no real sign that there is anything coming for him that would be negative, like we look at with some of the underlying metrics. On the other side, Gibson hasn't really been pitching particularly well, and I think that, unlike yesterday, we know that this Yankees lineup can, I think, provide a little bit of offense against Gibson, who has been perfectly average throughout this course of this year. 4.24 ERA, 4.42 fielding independent. Initial first blush looking at it overnight, you're like, all right, seems a little short. Maybe you could bump this up. It would make some sense if that was the case.
Yeah, weird game for the Yankees yesterday. They tried to come back, made a little bit of a run, but the Ryan O'Hearn 3-run shot off Will Warren in the third inning ended up holding out to be enough. Cubs and Pirates. The Cubs getting bet here as well from minus 148 to minus 155 largely. I actually was able to get down on a rogue off market minus 137 with Chicago here at Circa earlier this morning, but I see why they're getting bet. These two offenses are just on different planets right now.
I do not approve this.
Really?
I can't wait to talk to Adam Burke about this game. Unless there has been a pitching change, the Heen Dogs getting the start for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Andrew Heaney's been great. 172 ERA, 227 fielding independent. He's generating swings and misses like a mother right now. Like, the guy's been awesome. He's gone at least 6 innings in his last 4 starts, so I'm very curious to see. I was looking at maybe like over-under outs prop for him or something, but Heen Dog's been fantastic.
Here's the thing, though, about the Heen Dog is that the last 2 starts where he's been really, really amazing, it was against the Angels and Nationals. This Cubs offense. Sorry, no shade at your Angels, but
they're
this
like the worst
Cubs
team ever.
Offense, one of these things is not like the other. They are top 5 in runs, stolen bases, batting average, OPS, average Major League Baseball high 5.9 runs per game. And this isn't padded stats against bad teams. They have the most difficult strength of schedule in Major League Baseball.
I think the rebuttal would be, because I know we have to get to one here, but Imanaga's numbers underneath are also pretty shaky. So I do wonder if at some point he gets got. The problem is, do I want to use the Pirates lineup as my weapon of choice against him? And I don't think that would be the case.
Fair. Well, we shall see. I've already placed the bet. But if you want more detailed information on numbers like this, we talk about this line movement, all of the bet percentages, handle percentages, all of that is available for our VSiN Pro subscribers. Right now on VSiN.com, when you go to the Bet Splits page, you get not only the DraftKings kind of full nationwide public perspective, but the numbers here at Circa as well, where you do have professional bettors weighing in and putting their money on the line. So get all of that information at vsin.com/subscribe. Right now, VSiN's summer special. Get everything we have to offer here at the network for $59 until August 1st. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, deep dives into all 4 of the NBA games coming up tonight and our senior NBA betting analyst, Jonathan Von Tobel's best bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
NBA hour here on Money Moves as we welcome you back to the program alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you. We're live on SiriusXM channel 158, VSiN, the sports betting network. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we will have Justin Phan of Unabated join us and dive into some of the prop and series angles that he has. But let's stick with the 4 games we have on deck tonight here first, JVT. And we'll start with the first of the night, which we were talking earlier. Very early start.
Really early.
3:05 Pacific time for those of us here on the West Coast. Bucks Pacers 7.5, largely 8s out there with the Pacers in favor here. Total 222.5. The question for me is, what kind of effort do you think that we ultimately see with this Milwaukee Bucks team, knowing that Damian Lillard's not going to be out there and available? I heard Doc say that even within the game last game that injury was deflating for them. So what should the expectation be today?
I mean, it could be deflating. I think it's mostly about an Indiana offense that is really ran roughshod all over this Bucks defense. And Damian Lillard's presence is not changing that or fixing that. Offensive rating in half court or against set defenses, Indiana's averaging 102.1 points per 100 possessions. They're going to absolutely demolish this team when you're talking about their ability to get after Milwaukee's defense. So I think that when you look at it from that perspective, like, nothing's going to change here. So I think when you want to talk about attacking this, 8 might be a little inflated, especially when you're looking at it from the perspective of opening in some spot 7. Now we're up to 8. You miss out on the peak of the number. You can make an argument, I think, for Indiana's team total to go over here. Again, this is not a good perimeter defense. They have not been able to keep up with Indiana's perimeter talent. Still to this day, which is pretty fascinating considering what you have up front, Pascal Siakam has been eating the Bucks' lunch throughout this entire series and throughout the course of the regular season matchup for them. Outside of this last contest where he was largely quiet, in the 3 games prior to Game 4, he was averaging 25.7, 7.7 in terms of points and rebounds on 60% shooting. So Siakam is, again, a matchup nightmare for this team. You would assume the environment back home also helps them as well. So I think you maybe go like team total over, because the problem is hanging over all of this is Giannis Antetokounmpo still. And Giannis has been incredible. They don't have an answer for him either. And just his effort alone could keep them inside of this number, while Indiana still has a very good offensive showing. I think there's a potential for that. So I'd gravitate more toward like Pacers team total over than anything else.
I think that's a good angle because, to your point, you're still going to get your best effort from Giannis, who's been great, even if the role players around him are incapable and inept at times, it has seemed. But for the Bucks, Mike, I just feel for them. Like, not a ton of hope right now. The narrative immediately following the Dame injury was less about this game and more about what's going to happen with Giannis in the future and how they don't have draft picks and is he going to move on and all of those things. And so I think that even with Giannis coming out with the mentality that he's going to have as a team, I don't know how invested they will be. So I stayed off of this game. I like that approach, but I want, quite frankly, just nothing to do with the Bucks tonight in this one. I do think maybe even a first quarter angle with the Pacers could be interesting. It's only -2.5. And if they, to your point, are back at home, they come out firing, they want to do what they can to put this away and put the Bucks down early. Maybe that was an angle I was looking at.
Here's the real thing, and we probably, like this, I say this all the time on primetime when we would do these games while they were on. In reality, you can make the very strong argument it's fool's errand to bet really any of these games from a pre-flop standpoint. There's so many possessions.
It is so
it's so volatile. So, for example, like to your point, maybe Indiana gets off to a good start. Maybe Giannis comes out and is pretty dominant early on, and a 8 or an 8.5 pre-flop becomes 6.5, 6 in the midst of a game, and you can find something somewhat cheap on the Indiana Pacers. That might be an angle worth looking at too. Is just sitting back to see where this game is going to ultimately end up once it begins.
Giannis points prop tonight. 32.5, and it's juiced to the over.
I think you can that or points, rebounds, and assists. So for the series, he's averaging, I think, like 53.5, 54, somewhere in that range. The number out there is 51.5 right now for points, rebounds, and assists, slightly shaded to the over at last look. Again, like they don't have anything for him, but that's part of like what makes this, to your point, so tragic. They have nothing for Giannis. It's a Greek tragedy. And yet he goes out there every single day, completely dominates this team, and then he looks up and he's down by 12. Like, it seems so futile. So maybe that's the way. If you're going to be pro Milwaukee, there is a universe in which, like, for example, you look at a couple of these games in which he was dominant. The first 2 games in Indiana, 36-12 on 14 to 23 shooting, 34-18 and 7 on 14 to 20. They lost and failed to cover both of those games.
Pistons-Knicks game 5. Knicks laying 5.5 at home, total 214. Obviously, the no call at the end of last game looms large for Pistons fans and Pistons moneyline bettors. Even the crew chief comes out after the end of the game and says, hey, we did the wrong thing there. How do they respond now down 3-1 when they feel like they should be at a 2-2 tie?
Yeah, I don't know the response here. The way I approached this game was I bet this over on the overnight. So I think part of what you're talking about here does, I think, affect this game, which is officiating has been the front and center of that that fourth game, where you're talking about them letting them play or the missed call at the end of that contest, where I do think you probably get a little bit more of a tightly officiated game, teams getting into the bonus early, so that might affect the way that this game is played. I also think that when you look at these teams from the standpoint of how they have shot, again, looking at some of these these metrics that would tell you how teams would generally shoot if given these shots on average, both of these teams are well below what they've been supposed to be doing if they were shooting on average. So for the quality of shots they're getting, I think you're going to potentially get this thing over. One would assume the Knicks offense performs much better back at home, familiar shooting backgrounds. The Pistons have not had an answer for Jalen Brunson, but vice versa. Cade Cunningham has been a problem for them. I think that this is one where you probably get a better and higher scoring affair back in New York. We saw that second game go over this total. I think that was 116 to 114, something like that. I think you get much more of a game like that this time around with the addition of potentially more free throws because it gets a little bit tighter.
Brunson had 30-plus points in every game so far in this series. His prop tonight, 29.5. Obviously, he got hurt last game, ends up coming back, wonderful in clutch time. Do you think he's fine? Is there any risk in that? If people like the Knicks tonight, do you like Brunson over 29.5?
I'm laughing because, yes, because I thought he was going to get his leg amputated over the weekend. He gets his leg caught up. He can't put any weight on it. He goes back to the locker room. I don't know if you saw. I don't know who put it out, but there's a great image of like when Jalen goes back to the locker room, and it's just this giant dresser drawer full of different legs that he can just put back on and go back out there. Like, he looked like he was going to die, and then all of a sudden he's back out there. And again, they just don't really have an answer for him. I do think that works against them at times. The times in which their offense has looked its most stagnant, it's when he is just hunting for fouls and going a little ISO heavy. But at the same time, they clearly don't have anybody to guard him, really. Like, Asar Thompson does a fine job against him, but they hunt for different guys. Schroeder's not going to shut him down. So to that point, especially if you think the Knicks are going to close this out, I would assume that it is going to be in large part due to Jalen Brunson performing well and maybe going over that point total prop.
Best series by far has been Clippers-Nuggets. This has been fun every game. Denver opened a 1-point favorite. We mentioned in Do You Approve This Move last segment as far out now in some places as the Clippers laying 2. What's the best way to look at this game, especially with it back in Denver, but so many people liking LA?
Well, this one's actually the real easy answer for in-game, right? Because it's 1.5 point spread. So any sort of minimal move, whatever it's going to be, this is going to be pretty volatile in the way that this line is going to swing throughout, because this is essentially a near pick contest. Obviously, the Clippers are rated as the better team because they are road favorites in a playoff environment, but still, it's a very tight spread, which is going to get you going one way or the other, I think, relatively quickly, depending on some runs. I just do wonder. Like, I hate going with the angle. Like, I do like some tangible, like, evidence to support what you're looking at. You can point to the non-garbage time net rating, the fact that they have outscored them over the course of 100 possessions of non-garbage time by nearly 8 points. Again, the teams that have a net rating similar to the Clippers either up 3-1 or have swept their opponents. So we can kind of tell from that they should be and are the better team. But do we trust them to get their heads out of their rear ends and actually do this? I mean, you talk about a squad that at times has been blowing this team out of the water, whether it is beating them by, 20, 30 points in Game 3, in that comeback over the weekend, completely shutting them down and making them work. The matchups work for them. Zubac has done a tremendous job, as much as you can, against a guy like Jokic. They've eaten up some of the other matchups as well. So I do think this is the side, but it's pretty volatile, man. Once this game starts, you could probably get a better number once it actually starts to begin.
You mentioned points, rebounds, assists earlier. Could Kawhi be a potential target for something like that, or anything props-wise that maybe as you were going through caught your eye?
I mean, one would assume, again, so you kind of saw it down the stretch of this last game, right, which is, okay, like at some point, can we just go with the, hey, Kawhi, you do it offense, right? Seriously, like when you look at his usage rate, one would assume that it's probably going to start to get a little bit higher. And in fact, it has, as the series has gone along, it has gotten a little bit higher. The last 2 games, his usage rate was at 28.4%. If you look at the first 2 games, it was at 25.5%. So as the series has gone along, they have run more possessions through Kawhi. And like, that's what it should be. Like, bro, go carry us, please. Let's go do this thing. You also have seen his minutes at certain times. Like, they blew him out in Game 3, but he played 40 minutes in Game 4. He played 41 minutes in Game 1. If these are going to be tight contests, which we assume is going to be the case, he's going to have a higher usage rate. He's going to play more minutes, and one would assume that he is a candidate to go over points and rebounds in that regard.
Remember, everybody, Edge Boost, the first ever bank account built for bettors, ensuring any and all gambling transactions are approved. No usage fees, no minimums. You get cash back rewards, plus 100% approval for any and all betting deposits. Sign up today over at edgeboost.bet and use our promo code MONEY. Deposit $25. Edge Boost will match that deposit for you at edgeboost.bet, edgeboost.bet. We're going to continue the NBA talk next. Justin Phan, managing director over at Unabated Sports, going to stop by, get his reaction to last night, what we can take away from the Warriors and Rockets, plus his thoughts on this evening's slate as well. Don't go anywhere. More Money Moves after this.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you. Excited to continue diving into all things postseason NBA with Justin Phan, who joins us here on the Progressive Guest Line, managing director over at Unabated Sports. And before we get into tonight, I do want to ask you, Justin, about what we saw transpire last night. Obviously, 2 very different games, so let's focus on the one with the Warriors and Rockets, where Golden State now has taken the advantage in this series against the 2 seed in the Western Conference. This is a team team that a lot of people were betting on to not only win this series, but win it all. A lot of sportsbooks have liability on Golden State. How do you see their chances moving forward?
Yeah, I kind of want to switch focus a little bit to the Rockets side because I do think the ball is in their court for the rest of the series. And a lot of it for me ultimately will come down to Ime Udoka. So I want to kind of get to the coaching in this series a bit because Steve Kerr has coached circles around Ime this series. We saw some mistakes from Ime down the stretch last night. He pulled Steven Adams after Kerr opted for Hakakiwi. He challenged that clear Dylan Brooks foul and didn't have a timeout to run the final play. And then when he did run that, one of the second to last play, he could have done a much better job forcing the mismatch. You had Şengün ISOing against Draymond Green. It was just a very poor display from Ime down the stretch. And after last night's loss, Ime said he'd take a look at changing the Rockets starting lineup. And Rockets fans everywhere are saying finally. So, one of the differences in this series has been, Kerr has made those proactive adjustments to their starting lineup and got out ahead of potential spacing and lineup combination issues. We saw Quentin Post start in Game 3. We saw Buddy Hield start in Game 4. So I think in Game 5, we'll see Ime finally make a lineup change, whether it's just one of Steven Adams or Jabari Smith Jr. or both of them remains to be seen. So I think that will, in a way, flip the series potentially. That zone with that double big lineup has given the Warriors some issues. And this lineup change potentially would put the Rockets back on the offensive. The Rockets have been at their best in this series when they're forcing the Warriors to play their game. We saw double big from Ime last night in Steven Adams and Şengün. And as a result, it forced Steve Kerr to put out these weird Guy Santos, Quentin Post, Kevon Looney lineups that were a disaster. We saw Kerr have to pull the Trace Jackson Davis lever. So the more that Ime can force Steve Kerr into those types of decisions, the more I like the Rockets' chances in Game 5. I think Ime's waited way too long to make this lineup change where it's been clear they've been at their best when they are going bigger. And I think we'll see that. We'll see Ime lean into that heavily where Adams might play 28 to 30 minutes potentially in Game 5. So I would expect those changes. And as a result, would expect the Rockets to win Game 5.
So to win, would it be to cover if you assume that those changes are going to be made? They're a 4-point favorite right now on the board. That seems like a pretty tangible swing to be a 4-point underdog on the road and now laying 4 back in your home building.
Yeah, I do think the 4 is pretty fair, honestly. I like the Rockets to win, but that is a huge swing. And, the problem for Ime is that Kerr knows it's coming. We saw that clip in the locker room afterwards where he kind of ribbed Buddy Hield a little bit in a playful way, but right after got down to business is like, we know they're going to play double big next game, and we're going to go into the film room and make the adjustments accordingly. So I think, Kerr, that coaching staff, he has very good assistants with him. Terry Stotts, who was a longtime head coach for the Blazers, is on that staff as well. They're going to be prepared. It's not going to come out of nowhere. So I think they'll counter accordingly. And I think this 4 is a little bit rich for me. And this Warriors team, has proven time and time again that they are up to making adjustments. And, Steve Kerr isn't afraid to pull a couple levers.
Justin Phan, Managing Director at Unabated Sports, joining us here on the Progressive Guest Line. As we shift gears to the 4-game slate that's coming up tonight, which of those games from a betting perspective caught your eye first and foremost?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Bucks Pacers. And, I know you guys talked a little bit about Clippers Nuggets already. I don't think there's really too much interesting for me in that Magic Celtics game either. But I kind of want to talk about this Bucks Pacers game. And this has potential Cavs Heat vibes for me where the Pacers might close this out in, dramatic, very strong fashion. I would be looking at some alts. This line has been kind of moving. I've seen some 8.5s as well. It was 7.5 yesterday. And for me, this Bucks team just has no chance now without Dame. And you look at the impact of Dame, he didn't even play that well when he was out there. He shot 6 for 27 in the series, but the Bucks are still far better with him on the court than off. He still has the highest net rating of any Bucks player in the series, and there's a reason for that. Their supporting cast has largely been a disaster. You look at, without Dame Lillard now, you have Kyle Kuzma, who's arguably been the worst rotation player in the playoffs. Brook Lopez, 37 now, and he struggled a lot in this series against Miles Turner and his mobility. Taurean Prince, pretty much unplayable at this point. So I don't think that Doc has any more adjustments to make here. He's going to be forced to play 30-plus minutes of Kevin Porter Jr. He's going to have to play 34, 35 minutes, potentially, of Bobby Portis. There's just not that many players left in this rotation that can make an impact. And this Pacers team has so much stability and depth, where the more that you can kind of stick to your game plan, stick to your rotation, the better chances you have. And the Pacers can just play their game, their normal rotation, and the Bucks just have way too much volatility right now and very little by way of supporting help around Giannis. I think we'll see that become a big issue this summer, where they're going to have to make some decisions with Dame on the books for the next couple of years, and then Kuzma as well. So I think this is going to be kind of the start of the end for Giannis and the Bucks, and potentially the last game we'll ever see Giannis play in a Bucks uniform.
Justin, what do we do with Detroit, New York? Anything? Because the Pistons, I think, have played better than what the series result right now would indicate. And right now they're catching 5.5 totals, 214. That's getting bet up as well.
I mean, this series has basically come down to crunch time. One team has Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, and the other team does not. The dominance that those two have, put forth in crunch time has been incredible. And you look through the first 3 quarters of the game in this series, the Pistons have hung with them, and it's been pretty even. The difference has been the Knicks have really separated themselves down the stretch, and in crunch time, the Pistons just can't score down the stretch in those situations. So I do, once again, would be fine with looking at Knicks live. The Pistons have dominated third quarters in this series, and I do think there's a decent chance that they'll come out after the third quarter ahead of this one, and you can bet Knicks live. But Pistons first half, I think, is also an angle that I look at. But yeah, this series has kind of played out similarly in each of these games so far, where the Pistons have played well, they've acquitted themselves well, but just down the stretch, it's been a completely different story.
Justin, real quickly before we hit the break, 30 seconds. The Lakers are down 3-1 to the Timberwolves, laying 5.5 tomorrow. Like them? How do you feel about it?
I'd still take the Wolves here. The depth for the Lakers just becomes a huge problem, where JJ's having to play his starters all 24 minutes in the second half. I just don't see a whole lot changing there. The physicality continues to be a big issue for the Lakers to handle. They can only lean into this small lineup so much. 5.5 seems aggressive to me. I'd still take the Wolves to keep it close, if not win outright. So not a whole lot of levers for JJ to pull here.
Plus 190 on the money line there for the Timberwolves for those with inquiring minds. Justin, you're awesome as always. Thanks so much for doing this, pal.
Thanks for having me.
Justin Phan, everybody, of Unabated. And remember, you can get more NBA prop analysis and game analysis like this over at Unabated when you head to unabated.com/vsin. You can get some of that additional subscription information. They've got expert profitable player prop projections, NBA news. They're very quick to release breaking news to help you find an edge on a market, start sit projection scenarios. And you can get access to Unabated's expert team through their Discord channels, as well as regular interactive live streams. Again, unabated.com/vsin. It's how you can get more information on how to subscribe. On that note, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, resetting for hour 2 of the program, we're going to look at a really big MLB slate coming up today. All 30 teams, 15 games in action.
I've also read maybe the stupidest thing I've ever read.
Oh, Now that's a tease, ladies and gentlemen. Back in a flash on Money Moves, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.